Hey there everyone, it's Mecha Draco coming to you with a review of Horizon Zero Dawn. Now I don't normally obviously do reviews, but I decided that since Horizon Zero Dawn being a game that I really enjoyed and a game that I also can't record for you guys, I figured I'd do the next best thing that I could, which would be to give you guys as biased as fuck and a badly done, spoiler-ridden review. Consider that your spoiler warning. If you don't want to hear anything about the game, leave now. I will be doing my best to keep the story spoilers at a minimum, but no promises and that something won't slip through. So let's get right into this, shall we? To start off with, I'm going to say once again, this is going to be a biased review. I'm going to try my best to be as unbiased as possible, but in the end, I'm only human. And this human loved this game. Everything about this game was great, from the rich environments to the heart-racing combat and compelling storyline. I was immersed in its world to the very end, and though the game was a little long-winded for me, and there's still plenty of things that I haven't done yet, the game let me play it the way I wanted to play. Nothing felt forced, and that's something I can really appreciate. However, even though I really did enjoy the game, there were still a few things that I simply couldn't ignore that were glaring issues in the gameplay and in the story. Let's break this all down a little bit for you guys, starting with the environment you play in. From the opening cinematic to the second you put the controller down in victory, you are immersed into a world that feels and looks exquisite. Everything from the trees of the forest to the wreckage-ridden wastes of the desert feels like it belongs in this story. Though normally, I wouldn't put much stock into graphics and other things like that, never would I say that having good graphics is a bad thing for your game. And not only did they make these environments look gorgeous, but also made them make sense, which is something I can really appreciate as well. The transition from one biome to the next seems almost flawless. You can see and feel as the world changes around you slowly as you move through it. Thick green forests starting to thin out as it slips into the mountainside, spotted trees covered in snow as you start to incline up the peaks. Soon, no trees and little plant life remain as you start to get up to the tops and the ends of the peak of the mountains, and you finally find the fortress you were looking for. Which I think is a good segue into the next part of the environments, which is done very well, which is the homes, and the small towns, and even the bigger cities. The people seem to almost be a little bit different as you are actually starting out in the smaller towns and some of the things, but as you start to actually go into the bigger cities and the bigger towns, you can really feel them start to change because of their ideologies, because of their upbringings and other things like that. Something you can really take in as you progress. They even take into account the locations' distances from various events. Some locations may not have ever even heard of what you've done, while others give you endless amounts of upheaval and well-wishing, and they just have nothing but good things to say about you, is the best way I could put it. Even the guards in the cities start to respond to you differently as you get farther and farther into the game. Starting out, they seem to be uncaring of your presence. They even might make comments about it, but soon, after you've actually done a few of the quests and you've actually continued along with the story, they actually start to stand at attention for you as you walk by. They see you as almost like an authority figure. They do a fantastic job at really immersing you into the progression you make in this game, and it's something that I don't really see in a lot of games. It's something I can obviously, once again, really appreciate and enjoy. However, though I enjoy the environment a lot, I did have a few issues here and there. Primarily, my issue is with the climbing system they had in the game. Most games nowadays use a universal climbing system. You can grab and climb on just about anything. However, in Zero Dawn, you use sort of an older system that they use like a very obvious bright yellow handholds. Now, this isn't inherently a bad thing. Though I don't really like this kind of thing, it could have been overlooked very easily, if it weren't for the fact that it's done terribly. Oftentimes, you will find yourself diving off the side of a cliff as you go to grab one of these things, or suddenly you'll climb up onto the handholds and have no choice but to plummet to your death because it won't let you drop back down or jump back to where you started. You will sometimes even jump and hit dead on to these handholds, and she simply won't grab it, and you'll just fall to your death. It was an extremely annoying endeavor to have to deal with throughout the entirety of the game, because it is a part of the entire game. And I played this game on the hardest difficulty, and I died more to the climbing system than I did to the machines. Though as enemies, they are definitely different from other games. Their progressive difficulty and overall mechanics are pretty similar to other games. This, however, isn't a bad thing, because having unique enemies with familiar difficulties can be useful when including more people's tastes in games, as well as their experience. However, there are still plenty of enemies that fall into the bland, basic side, such as the normal humans that you'll fight, and even some on the more unique and heavily difficult to understand side, such as the larger, more difficult machines. Which I also feel is a good thing, giving people more of a challenge while also able to deal with some of the enemies quickly and easily because they are so bland, so easy to understand. However, despite the diversity of the game's forces and the very obvious effort they put into their creation, I can't say that everything was done as well as it could have been. One of the bigger issues I found in the game was the lack of diversity in playstyles when dealing with some of the larger, tougher enemies. Let's take stealth for example. When dealing with many of the smaller enemies, stealth can be a viable option in many situations. As enemies get larger, stealth starts to drop off dramatically in its overall usefulness. An enemy that looks like a one hit from a stealth attack should do, ends up only taking maybe a fourth of its HP from an attack. Then when you start to get into the even bigger machines, stealth isn't even an option any longer. You can't even go up to them and stealth attack them in any way. Though I am well aware of the various methods of how to take down the many machines you face in this game, because there are many other options you can use. Besides just stealth, it's hard to ignore the disregard for those that wish to play a bit more quietly. With that being said, there are still a few options for stealth even when dealing with some of these larger machines. However, for the most part, they are very limited, and in some parts of the game is even more so, where stealth is completely nullified, and you have no choice but to directly assault someone. With a game that is supposed to be, and even does, advocate for diverse play, these strange additions seem to be out of place. This moves me into the leveling system a bit. Though they try to add a diverse system to the game, the leveling itself does little to assist you with this. First few skills and abilities are great for supporting any playstyle you choose. However, after those first select few, there are only a handful of skills as you go along that truly change the way the game is played or affect your overall power level. One of the entire trees is almost completely useless until you get to the very end of it. The diversity in how you play this game is more on your equipment and how you choose to play it, not so much on the skills and the abilities you learn as you level. Though that isn't to say that you can't just play without them, because you do need them, but it is to say that many of the skills are just there for you to get to one of the more important skills later down the tree, or at least that's how it feels. Which I think is a good segue into equipment. I was actually a big fan of how they chose to handle equipment in this game. I think they did a great job with it. Following a similar style as Far Cry Primal with the crafting system, and then purchases from traders as better equipment gets unlocked as you level, because the equipment in this game actually unlocks as you level up further and further. You can even own several of the same pieces of armor or weapons, changing them out as you see fit to deal with the enemies you had in front of you, altering them slightly so that they work in the same as the other weapons, but better in the situation you're currently found yourself in. The diversity in weapons and armor was also done rather well, and though I wouldn't say they have hundreds of choices of weapons and other things, they had a large enough stock to choose from that never lets you feel like your weapon choice was limited for whatever situation you got into. You likely will find yourself using just the same weapon over and over again, but that's all in fun. Even if you simply love one of the weapons or love them all, you still can find a way to prevail. Which I think leads me to the last part of this game. The best and the worst part of this game being the story. The story in this game is huge. The lore in the background, everything that went into this game to making this world is mind-blowing. I barely looked for or listened to any of the lore, and I spent easily several hours on it alone. I can only imagine the time spent for those that are interested in it. The entire story is centered completely around the main character, Aloy. You can really feel as you explore and progress through the story as it changes the world around you. As I said earlier in this video, the guards and the citizens will start to change their reactions and opinions of you as you start to change the world that they live in. That can be pretty immersive and honestly a nice addition to the overall game. I don't want to get into the story itself because spoilers, but they did a great job at really locking you into it, wanting you to see what happens next, seeing what new machine you might have to fight next, or what your enemies have in store for you and your allies as the game continues. It's just so compelling and is easily my favorite part of the game. However, regardless of my enjoyment, I have to still point out some of the problems I felt that there were in the story. Specifically, over-feminization. Now, let me explain this a little bit before you jump on me. The fact is, this game worked well with its female leads. Aloy being the main character, and even the matriarch or system that they had at the very beginning of the game, and up throughout the majority of the game, all works. It all makes sense. The issue comes from the clear agenda-driven lines and characters that come out of some of the side quests and even some of the story missions that just feel completely unnecessary. Strong women are all well and good, and it's not wrong to think that there are some dumb men, but when the entire world is filled with bigoted, lump-headed men and strong, independent women that just don't need no man, it just starts to not make any sense. Almost every good person you meet in this game, good, quote-unquote good, is some kind of strong-willed woman. And almost every man you meet is either the bad guy, dumb as a bag of bricks, or they hate women in some way. Or they look down on them in some way. You oftentimes end up going on these big, long quests where the men are either killed off, because that's your whole mission, it's just to kill off the evil men, or it's to change them. It's to start to think more clearly. They realize that women are just as good as they are, and it's just... it feels so unnecessary, and just sometimes it just destroys the story. Luckily, it does start out very light, and only becomes really noticeable at the later parts of the game. They tend to try to hide it at some points with different types of comments about where you came from, but we all know what they're trying to do there. Only when it starts to get obnoxious near the end of the game do you really just want to put your controller down and walk away. But you've already come so far, you just can't stop. Kudos to them at least for knowing where and when to put the messages. There are no bad females in this game. That's something else I do want to point out. Though they do have female, like, henchmen minions at some points of the game, none of them are bigger leaders. There are no big female leader bad guys. And that, to me, just makes no sense. With all of these strong, empowered, strong-willed women in this game, all the leaders and frontrunners being female, basically, not one woman decides to take the evil route? Other than a handful of henchmen? People that you just randomly kill and you can't even tell are female half the time? It just doesn't really fit the story to me. Well, anyways, that about wraps up this video, and I'm just going to end it in a summary. Overall, I love the game. I found myself coming back to it over. There was enough in the game to keep it from being perfect, but there was so much in it that made it great. Well, that's about everything I've got for you guys on this one today. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, you guys know the drill by now. Like, share, and subscribe. And of course, as always, guys, good luck out there. And don't forget to have fun.